The night my roommate told me my chest was, medically speaking, the only heat source available in a two-bedroom apartment with a broken thermostat. I was standing at the stove with a wooden spoon in one hand and absolutely no plan for what came next. My name is Bruno Costa. I'm 32, and until that night, I did not know it was possible to forget how stirring worked. Her name is Laura. She's 28. She's lived across the hall from my bedroom for 3 years. And she has never once, in all that time, said anything to me in half measures. What I'd actually said 10 minutes earlier was that the radiator in the hallway had been making a sound like a dying accordion since October, and that if she wanted to stand near the stove while I finished the sauce, she was welcome too. She took that as an invitation to press her back flat against my chest like I was a space heater with better conversation. Then, somewhere between the garlic and the second glass of wine neither of us should have poured, her hands went under my shirt, palms flat against my stomach, fingers cold as 2 ice cubes somebody had left out of a joke. I did not drop the spoon. I want that on the record. I simply stopped being a person who remembered what a spoon was for. That's the part where I should probably back up. I've spent the last 6 years memorizing wine pairings for other people's anniversaries. I work the floor at Ostro, a restaurant downtown that takes itself seriously enough to put a comma in the word tasting on the menu. And I am, by every metric that matters to the people who own it, an excellent waiter. I remember allergies. I remember which foretop complained about the bread basket last time. I can carry 4 plates up my arm without looking like I'm doing math in my head, even though I absolutely am. What I actually want, the thing I've wanted since I was 9 years old, standing on a step stool next to my grandmother while she rolled dough with a coffee can because we didn't own a rolling pin, is to be on the other side of that pass. Not delivering the food, making it. I have not told very many people that. My last relationship ended, in part, because I told her. Renata and I were together for 4 years. The kind of 4 years where you start describing the relationship using words like efficient and low conflict, which I now understand are not compliments. She worked in acquisitions. She wore blazers that cost more than my car. And she left in March, calmly, over coffee, with the specific cruelty of someone who has clearly rehearsed the sentence in the shower. I need someone who's already arrived, she told me. Not someone still playing chef in a kitchen nobody's paying him for. I want to tell you that I said something devastating back. I did not. I said, okay. And then I ate the rest of my croissant, because I am, apparently, a man who processes heartbreak through pastry. What I did instead, in the months after, was start cooking again, quietly. Alone mostly in the kitchen, I share with my roommate, using a stained, coffee-ringed notebook of my grandmother's recipes that I have never shown to a single living person. Not Renata, not my 2 closest friends, nobody. It felt too much like handing someone the actual shape of what I wanted, instead of the acceptable, laughable version of it. My roommate found the notebook once, early on, flipping through my kitchen drawer looking for a corkscrew. She held it up and said, "What's this?" And I said, "Nothing, family stuff," in the tone of a man hiding something significantly more incriminating than his grandmother's ragu. And she, mercifully, or maybe just distractedly, let it go. I should mention Laura properly now, because she is, structurally, the whole reason any of this is worth telling. Laura works the front desk at the Aldridge, a boutique hotel downtown with a lobby that smells like cedar and a general manager who insists the staff say, "of course," instead of "no problem," which Laura mimics at home, in a voice so flat it makes me laugh every single time. She has a laugh of her own that could make a bad shift take one respectful step backward. It's loud and slightly undignified, and completely unbothered by whether it's the right laugh for the room. She reads the ends of paperbacks first, which she says is not cheating, it's risk management. And no argument I have made in 3 years of cohabitation has changed her mind. She takes her coffee so pale, it's basically a coffee-adjacent dairy product. And she has never once, in 3 winters, worn socks inside the apartment, which I understand less each year. When she's nervous, she picks at the cuff of whatever sweater she's wearing until there's a thread loose enough to worry properly. When she's genuinely upset, she goes quiet in a way that makes the whole apartment feel like it's holding its breath. And I have learned, slowly, exactly how long to wait before I say anything. Sure, I want to be honest here. I wasn't blind, and I wasn't dead. I noticed her, anyone would have, but we had rules, unspoken and load-bearing. Don't make the lease weird. Don't make the group of mutual friends weird. Don't be the reason either of us has to find a new apartment in a rental market that currently resembles a hostage situation. So I filed it. Filed her the way you file a fact you've decided not to act on. Laura has a laugh like that. Also, do not think about it. It worked mostly for 3 years, right up until the radiator died and the landlord decided that someone will come look at it was an acceptable substitute for actually sending someone. It was the 2nd week of October, cold enough that our breath fogged in the hallway, when Laura came home from a double shift, dropped her bag by the door with the specific violence of a woman who has spent 9 hours saying, "Of course," to strangers, and announced that she refused, on principle, to be cold in her own home for one more night. "I'm making my grandmother's ragu," I told her, mostly to change the subject, because I had, in fact, been quietly rehearsing this exact dish for 2 weeks. Ostra was hosting a single guest chef night in November. 1 dinner, 1 menu, 1 shot for whichever line cook or ambitious waiter could convince the actual chef they belonged on the other side of the pass. And I had not told a single person at work I was trying for it. I had told Laura even less. I'd told her I was just cooking. "Smells like more than just cooking," she said, already unwinding a scarf, already drifting toward the kitchen the way she does when there's food, and she hasn't officially been invited, but has also never once needed to be. "It's for a thing," I said. "What thing?" "A me thing. Extremely detailed. Thank you." That's roughly 8 exchanges of banter I could give you from that one conversation alone. If I timed it, which, for the record, I have, mentally, more than once since. She wrapped herself in the blanket from the couch, the ugly brown one neither of us claims to have bought, and drifted closer to the stove, close enough that I could smell her shampoo under the garlic, something clean and citrus that had no business competing with a ragu and somehow won anyway. "Your radiator sounds like a dying accordion," she said. "I'm aware. I'm going to die of the cold in this apartment, and you're going to have to explain to my mother that you let me freeze 4 feet from an active stove. If you want to stand near the stove, you're welcome to. That's what the stove is for. Heat. It's a heat appliance." Thank you for that architecturally sound explanation. She stepped in anyway, back against my chest, blanket and all, in exactly the spot where a normal roommate does not stand. And I went very still, stirring the sauce with the focused intensity of a man defusing something. "You're tense," she said, tilting her head back slightly, close enough that I caught, again, that ruinous shampoo. "I'm just cold. This isn't a whole thing." I didn't say it was a thing. "You You went quiet in the specific way you go quiet when something's a thing. I did not have a rebuttal for that, because she was infuriatingly correct. Then, and I want to be precise about the order of events, because I have relitigated it in my head roughly 400 times since. Her hand slid out from under the blanket and in, under the hem of my shirt, palms flat against my stomach, fingers cold enough that my whole body flinched toward her instead of away, which felt, at the time, like a significant design flaw in my nervous system. "Your hands are freezing," I said, which is not what I meant. What I meant was several complete sentences I did not have permission to say out loud. "That's the whole plan, yeah." "There's a plan. There's a working theory." I stopped stirring. I wanted on the record, again, that I did not drop the spoon. But I did set it down with the exaggerated care of a man handling something explosive, because my hands had started doing something I hadn't authorized. "Laura?" "Bruno." Just our names. Back and forth low, the sauce going quiet behind us. Her thumb tracing one slow, absent line along my stomach that she almost certainly did not register as anything more than seeking warmth, and that absolutely leveled me anyway. "This is a bad idea," I said finally, because someone needed to name it, and I am, apparently, the load-bearing adult in this scenario. "We split a lease. If this goes wrong, one of us has to move out. And I've seen the rental listings this year. I'd rather live with you being weird about this than not live with you at all." She went quiet for a second, her forehead dropping, briefly, against my shoulder blade, close enough that I felt her exhale through my shirt. "That's a very responsible thing to say while I have my hands under your shirt," she said. "I contain multitudes." "You contain a ragout that's about to burn, technically." I turned the heat down without moving her hands, which required a physical coordination I did not know I possessed. And when I turned my head, just slightly, we were close enough that I caught the exact moment her gaze dropped to my mouth. Quick, barely there. Gone before I could be sure I hadn't imagined it. It ruined me a little. It's still, honestly, one of the more expensive half-seconds of my life. "We should probably stop standing like this," I said, not moving. "Probably," she agreed, not moving either. Her thumb found the ridge of an old scar on my forearm, a kitchen burn from years ago, one of the only physical proofs I have that I've been cooking longer than I've let anyone know. And traced it once, slow, like she was reading something written in Braille. "What's this from?" "A stove, long before this one." "You've been doing this longer than you let on." "I let on very little. It's a whole personality trait." "I noticed the notebook. Months ago, I didn't say anything." I went still in a different way then. Not the heat flinch kind. The other kind. The kind where someone's just told you they've been quietly holding a piece of you that you thought was hidden. That's when my phone rang. Loud and obscene against the kitchen counter. The landlord's name lighting up the screen with the timing of a man who has never once in his life had good timing. I answered it, mostly on reflex. And by the time I hung up, someone was coming Thursday, apparently, for the radiator. Laura had stepped back, blanket pulled tight around her shoulders again, the moment sealed shut like a door someone had thought better of walking through. "Dinner's almost ready," I said, my voice coming out lower than I meant it to. "Good," she said. "I'm starving." Neither of us mentioned her hands. We ate at the counter, 12 inches apart instead of the usual 4, and talked about nothing her general manager's new of course policy, my table six's ongoing feud with the bread basket, with the specific, careful brightness of two people pretending very hard that nothing had almost happened, when we both knew, with total clarity, that something had. She knocked on my door around midnight. I know it was midnight because I was lying in the dark, staring at the ceiling, doing the specific math of a man trying to convince himself he'd imagined an entire conversation. "Can I come in?" she said. Not really a question. Yeah. She sat on the edge of my bed, knees pulled up, the hallway light cutting a thin gold line across the blanket. And for a while she didn't say anything, just picked at the cuff of her sleeve, which is how I knew this was real, and not a version of the conversation I'd been rehearsing in my head. "I didn't put my hands under your shirt because I was cold," she said finally. "I had a working theory about that. I've wanted to do that for weeks, maybe longer. I use the cold as an excuse because I am, it turns out, a coward with excellent timing." I sat up slowly, my back against the headboard, giving myself, deliberately, a full 3 seconds before I answered, because I did not trust the first thing that wanted to come out of my mouth. "I've wanted that longer than is convenient," I said finally. "For a roommate situation, for a lease, for basically every practical consideration either of us has." That's not a no. It's not a no. It's also not a yes. I don't know what it is yet. I know I don't want to be the reason you have to find a new apartment, and I know I don't want to lie to you about the notebook anymore. And I know that if I kiss you right now, in this room, at midnight, with a landlord coming Thursday to fix the actual reason you had your hands under my shirt in the first place, I will not be able to tell you it was about anything except this. And I'd rather it be about something real. She looked at me for a long moment, her mouth doing something complicated. Not quite a smile, not quite the opposite. "You're annoyingly decent," she said. "I'm sorry for the burden. Ask me again tomorrow." Tomorrow. Not tonight. Tomorrow, when neither of us can blame it on the cold. She left it there, standing, hovering in the doorway, a beat too long before she said goodnight and pulled the door shut behind her. And I lay back down in the dark with the specific, ridiculous grin of a man who has just been handed something enormous disguised as a homework assignment. I did not ask her the next day. I want to explain why, because it's not a flattering reason, but it's the true one. I woke up to a photo my old college roommate had posted. Renata, at some rooftop thing downtown, laughing next to a man in a very expensive-looking coat. A small, unmistakable ring catching the light on her hand. Engaged, apparently, to someone in private equity. Someone who had, according to the caption, already arrived. I hadn't thought about Renata in months. I certainly hadn't planned to think about her at 8 a.m. on the one morning that mattered most in 3 years of careful restraint. But there it was, her exact sentence, resurfacing whole and intact. I need someone who's already arrived, not someone still playing chef in a kitchen nobody's paying him for. I still hadn't gotten the guest chef spot. I hadn't even asked for it yet. I was 32 years old, still folding napkins for a living, still hiding a notebook of recipes like it was something to be embarrassed about. And somewhere in the back of my head, an old, unhelpful voice pointed out that maybe Renata had simply been right. And maybe Laura deserved better math than "ask me tomorrow" from a man who hadn't arrived anywhere. So I went quiet. The specific kind of quiet Laura had once described in me. Except this time, I was the one doing it. And doing it badly, avoiding the kitchen, taking an extra shift I didn't need, coming home late enough that she'd already gone to bed. She noticed. Of course she noticed. She notices everything. It's practically her whole professional skill set, greeting strangers and clocking exactly what's wrong with them in 4 seconds at a front desk. By the second night, she was waiting up, sitting at the kitchen counter with 2 mugs of tea, one of them clearly poured for me and going cold. "You were supposed to ask me something yesterday," she said, not looking up from her mug. "I know. You didn't. I know that too. So either you changed your mind, which you're allowed to do, or something happened that you haven't told me about, which, given that we live together and I will find out eventually, you should probably just tell me now." I sat down across from her, turned the cold mug of tea in a slow circle, and told her the photo, the ring, the sentence, still exact after all this time, still landing with the same precision it had the day Renata said it over coffee. I told her I hadn't gotten the guest chef spot, hadn't even applied yet, and that some old, ugly part of me had spent 2 days wondering if Laura deserved a man who'd already arrived somewhere, instead of one still cooking in secret at midnight, with a stained notebook nobody was paying him for. She was quiet for a moment. Then she reached across the counter, picked up the fork resting by the pan of leftover ragu from 2 nights before, and ate a bite, cold, straight from the pot, watching me the entire time. "That's the best thing I've eaten in a year," she said. "And I eat lunch at a hotel that puts truffle oil on everything to justify the prices." I'm not finished. You've been feeding me your grandmother's food for 3 years and calling it just cooking. Like it's an apology instead of the actual best thing about living with you. I don't need you to have arrived anywhere, Bruno. I need you to stop hiding the parts of yourself you're proudest of because someone once used them as a reason to leave. She doesn't get to keep deciding what you're worth. She left. That's not a claim on you anymore. Love doesn't come with ownership papers for the people you've stopped valuing. I didn't say anything for a second, because I was busy discovering that a 28-year-old hotel receptionist eating cold ragu out of a pan at midnight had just said something more precise and more devastating than anything a 4-year relationship had managed. "That's annoyingly wise for someone who reads the last page of books first," I said. "Because I am, apparently, incapable of receiving sincerity without immediately deflecting it. I contain multitudes. You contain a mug of cold tea you made for a man who ghosted you for 2 days. Technically true, drink it anyway." I asked her the next morning, not with the ceremony you'd expect. No candles, no rehearsed speech, nothing that would have survived daylight, which felt appropriate, since daylight was, structurally, the whole point. I found her in the kitchen, hair still damp, wrapped in the same ugly brown blanket, standing near the stove, out of what I now understood was habit rather than necessity, since the radiator had, in fact, been fixed the day before. "You're standing by the stove," I said. "For no reason. The radiator works now." "I know. So that's not about heat. It never really was, if we're being honest." I crossed the kitchen, 3 steps, maybe 4, the exact distance that had separated us for 3 years of careful, deliberate restraint. And she didn't move toward me, dramatic or breathless the way it happens in the version of this story where nobody's scared. She just turned, slowly, not seductive, not performing anything, just brave, and looked at me like she'd already decided and was waiting for me to catch up. "Ask me," she said. "Can I kiss you? Today. Not because it's cold, not because of a landlord's timeline, not because of anyone who left either of us and doesn't get a vote anymore. Just because I've wanted to since approximately the 3rd week we lived together, and I'm done pretending that was about Elise. Finally, she said, and there was real relief in it, underneath the joke. She tasted like the pale, milky coffee she drinks every morning, and something underneath that, warmer, unhurried. And her hand found the collar of my shirt, fingers curling into the fabric the exact way they had that first cold night, except this time neither of us pretended it was about the temperature. I heard the small sound she made when I pulled her the rest of the way in. Felt her fingers tighten once, briefly, against my chest, right over the spot she'd once called, with a straight face, the only heat source in the apartment. When we finally broke apart, she rested her forehead against mine, and I could feel her still smiling. For the record, she said, your chest is, in fact, extremely warm. I was right about that from the beginning. You were right about several things. I usually am. It's a burden. 3 weeks later, I got the guest chef spot. 1 dinner, 1 shot. The chef at Ostro tried the ragu and said almost nothing, which, I've since learned, is the highest compliment he's capable of giving. I dedicated the dish quietly, on a handwritten card only 2 people ever saw, to a woman who taught me to roll dough with a coffee can. Laura came to opening night. She sat at the corner of the bar, ordered exactly the dish I was afraid to serve. And when I came out from the kitchen afterward, still in my whites, she held up her fork. Better than the version you fed me at midnight in a kitchen with a broken radiator, she said, though I'll always have a soft spot for that one specifically. The notebook sits on the kitchen counter now, instead of hidden in a drawer. She's added exactly 1 page to it, in her own handwriting, a recipe titled simply, "The One from the Cold Night," with no measurements at all, just the words. As much as it takes to feel warm. We haven't talked about the lease. We haven't had to. Some nights she still steals the blanket, still stands near the stove out of pure habit long after there's any real reason to. And I still, on occasion, forget how stirring works when she puts her hands under my shirt. Though now, at least, I know exactly what it means when I do. Have you ever been the one holding back, waiting for the right time, the right proof, the right version of yourself, only to realize the person in front of you had already decided you were enough and was just waiting patiently for you to catch up?